laptop that I haven't set up yet. So I'm like, okay, this is fantastic here. So we're on.
Okay.
You can see me. Fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, we are about to start 11 right now. So I already started the broadcast. So welcome everyone to Horizons by Hopkins Career Conference. The panel, How Do I Manage My Health and Wellness panel session. My name is Yuting Yuan. I'm second-year PhD student at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I have privilege of moderating today's discussion. Let's get started by briefly introduce our panelists. So first, we have our Dr. Tony Spann. He is an assistant professor of teaching in the School of Roses, Master of School Counseling program. And next, we have Dr. Erika Boone. She is the director of the NIH Division of Loan Repayment. And our third speaker today is Dr. Ness Arroyo. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Molecular Sciences at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Today, we'll be hearing about how each of our panelists manage their health and wellness during their graduate study and also in academia and also their workforce. First, on behalf of all the participants and organizers of Horizons, I would like to thank you to our panelists for volunteering their time to contribute to our Horizons conference. I'm excited to be moderating this discussion, looking forward to our conversation today. So, and also, by the way, for our participants, please feel free to ask any question relevant to the discussion today with the chat, and you can put your questions in the discussion board in the chat board, and I will do my best to incorporate them into our discussion as we go. For the last 15 or so minutes of the panel session, we will open the floor to any questions or viewers may have for the panelists. So yeah, let's get started. Since all three of your experiences are examples of combining passions and maybe like to have like a lot of topics related to the wellness and healthcare, that's the topics that we have today. So, but first, maybe could each of you tell us a little more about yourself, maybe give us your background, your education, and how you ended up where you are now. So maybe Dr. Spann, let's start with you.
Okay, so good morning to everybody listening and to the panelists and to our moderator. So my background is pretty interesting. I've always wanted to be in mental health ever since the age of 7, and that's really been my path. And so currently as a clinical area practice that
we are like Dr. Spann is breaking up a little bit, so maybe we can like start with Dr. Boone first, and we can wait the Dr. Spann to like come back again.
This is a prime example of how you manage stress during the time of COVID. We've all had 10,000 workshops and presentations that we have made, but nothing like the morning of when you're having technical issues. For my background, I have a PhD in biobehavioral health, which is behavioral neuroscience from Penn State University. And I have a BA in biology from Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama. It's a very small, historically Black college. I completed a couple of postdocs, University of Illinois at Chicago, as well as Emory University. And life happened, and so I had to make some different decisions career-wise. And I figured, how about I just try to work for the federal government? Didn't really understand the whole process of applying. I just thought I'll apply for some positions and I know I'll get something. My background is in substance abuse and addiction. So a perfect fit for me would have been NIDA or NIAAA, right? So my mom says that God protects babies and fools because, of course, I did not understand the whole process that was involved. But luckily, I survived it, and I landed in the Office of Science Policy and Communications at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, where I was able to capitalize on my knowledge and experience in the area of substance abuse and addiction, but apply it via a policy realm. So, of course, because I'm federal government, we do not lobby, but what we do is we do educate. We educated various aspects within the extramural community. It could be school-age children, it could be parents, it could be physicians, it could be other researchers on issues that are important with regards to NIDA and the country regarding substance abuse and addiction. For example, my area was tobacco and substance abuse, but some of the top areas, tobacco addiction. But some of the top areas at NIH was marijuana, opioids, tobacco, so on and so forth. So it was really interesting how I was able to kind of pivot my career. Pivot is usually associated with a negative thing, right? It means that something didn't work out and we feel really bad about that. But pivoting, there's power in that, right? So you're able to utilize your knowledge and your passion and apply it in a very different way. And I became the director for the Division of Loan Repayment because in my portfolio was the loan repayment program. And I always felt that this was one of the better parts of my job because I was really able to, spend that one-on-one time and to talk more to early stage investigators. The place where I had to exit out of the biomedical research workforce because life tends to happen to you. So it was part of my mission to help keep people like me in research for as long as possible. And when the directorship for the Division of Loan Repayment position came along, probably about 5 or 6 people sent me the advertisement and said, you should apply. And I looked at the advertisement and I said, well, I don't have all of those qualifications, so I'm not going to apply. And those same 5 or 6 people came back and said, if you don't apply, we're going to kill you. So I applied and I got the interview and got the position. And it has really been my honor to serve in this capacity. And thank you for having me here today. Long-winded conversation or a description, but that's kind of how life happens, right?
Perfect. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Boone. And we got back with Dr. Spann. So maybe you can start with your background again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly right now.
Brief, just in case, and then I'll be kind of working with the Wi-Fi situation. So my background, I'm an alumni of Johns Hopkins University. I received my master's in clinical counseling, my PhD in school psychology from Howard University, and I've been in the field going on 10 years now. That's 10 years of academia and 10 years of being an actual clinician. And I've enjoyed it immensely, particularly working with students, new school counselors, new emerging clinicians, and getting them into the field and getting them prepared. And so currently I'm at the University of Southern California, working with school counseling students in the School of Russier. And, it's been a joy. So I think when we think about wellness, mental health, and working with clinicians to help the community, to help people at large, that's really my background.
Yeah, I think first, welcome back to Hopkins. Although we are virtually, but welcome back. And Dr. Roy, so maybe you can start with your background.
Sure. I'm very happy that I got to hear a little bit more about Erica and Rufus's background. You guys are awesome. And I wanted to touch upon the point that Erica made, which is pivoting in your career is key. It's key to success and key to keeping you creative, in my opinion. I was born and raised in Mexico, in a small, well, it's not a small town, but in a city called Puebla, about 4 million people. I went to college in the north of my country, in a place called Tec de Monterrey, or Monterrey Tech. That's where I got my degree in chemistry. And from there, I wanted to, I always had the dream to do research. I was in love with molecules, with technology development. And so I pursued postdoctoral training at the University of Texas at Austin in material sciences research. So a little different to what I did as an undergraduate. And then when I graduated, I had a conversation with my mentor at the time, and he said, Nets, what do you want to do in life? And I said, well, I want to continue to do research, and everything I've done is material sciences, so I think I should continue doing that. And he said, that's a terrible idea, Nets, because everybody's doing material sciences research. So what you need to do is go out there and find something that nobody else is working on. And so I was fortunate enough to land a position as a postdoctoral trainee at the University of California, Santa Barbara in the space of biophysics. So radically different to what I did as a PhD trainee. I completed my postdoctoral training in biophysics, where I developed a technology that we now can use for addressing important questions in pharmacology. And so now I am an assistant professor in pharmacology and molecular sciences. So many pivotal changes in my professional career that I believe are risky, but also exciting and keeping me creative.
Thank you for all your background introduction. Like you all have like diverse background, like the different kind of the work path. So if there are any kind of like questions, if our like participants that you have, you can put in the discussion board. Like if you're curious about any kind of the career transition for each of our panelists, you can put on the discussion board. And so like maybe we can transit to our discussion today about the health and wellness. When we are in the grad school, we have like more or less make efforts to manage our health and wellness. So that of course might and probably will also a big concern once we enter the workforce as well. But sometimes it's a big challenge for us to manage well, for example, like the stress and weakness of health. We want to know a little more about how do you, like each panelist, think about health and wellness by yourself? Like for example, did you think about it specifically in your daily life during your grad study and right now? And what was your thought process behind this? And what kind of suggestions maybe you have for like manage it well? So we can also start with like Dr. Boone.
Can you hear me? Because I can't hear any of the panelists except for you. So, okay, great. So sorry, I don't have the benefit of hearing from the other panelists today. There's something weird going on. But in grad school, no, I didn't pay any attention to health and wellness, or at least it wasn't a topic that was really readily discussed. I got my PhD in 2000. Yeah, it was a little while ago. But I think that maybe even just that in 2000, the perspective was just like it was prior to that. You keep your nose to the grindstone and you don't really talk to your mentor about what's really going on outside of your research and what's going on with your life, because it's not that no one cared about that. It's just that that wasn't a regular conversation that many people were having with their mentors. And that was something that I sought to change when I started to mentor other people, because you bring a total person into the lab. You, as my mother would say, you bring yourself everywhere you go, right? And that all of you is not just the person who's conducting research, it's not just the graduate student. But I also didn't really feel empowered to talk about things that were going on in my life that may have been impacting how I was showing up, whether it be in lab or whether it be in publication or whatever it might be. I don't think that I really paid attention much to it until I had my son in my last 2 years of graduate school. And that probably is not the best time to start a family, because you're trying to finish up. But, you know, sometimes, as I said, life happens and you roll with that, right? But because my area, again, was early life experiences, that's when I started to talk or to really kind of think about the impact of how I was living my life and how, you know, any kind of implications I could have for my unborn child, or when, you know, I had this child and how I was presenting to him and how I might be carrying my stress and how it might impact him. And for anyone who has children, if you are stressed out or if you're sad or angry, your kids feel that, whether they can speak or whether they can't. And they cling to you in an effort to try to make you feel better and to comfort you. But I really kind of didn't start thinking about my own health and wellness really as it pertained to how I showed up in my performance and my success until late stage graduate school. But since that point, I've really started to really think about it and really incorporate that and thinking about that. And as someone would tell me, thinking big thoughts about myself and how I want to accomplish those, because all of us think about these grandiose ideas. I want to do X, Y, and Z, but we kind of don't think about how we get there and how we support ourselves on the way there, because an empty vessel can't fill anything else. It can't fill anyone else, right? So you really do have to think about your own well-being, your own physical health. And I think that it's really coming to the forefront now with COVID. You really kind of have to be protective of your own mental space, because once you start getting on that hamster wheel, you can spin yourself up really well. So I love that there is a discussion about imposter syndrome that's going on with Horizons, because I do talks or workshops on imposter syndrome, which I've done at Hopkins before. Because with talking with early stage investigators, I found that even 20 years after I completed my doctorate, individuals in their early stages of their career are still kind of mentally going through those same things. They understand the didactics of how to apply for a loan repayment program award or how to apply for a career development award. But it's really some of those other underlying personal things that can really impact how they show up for it, how they prepare for it, how they can really improve their success and personal and professional career development just by paying a little bit attention to yourself. And I'll be quiet after this, but this is something that's really, I love this topic. But a few years ago, I completed a leadership development course at Brookings in DC. And one of the things they talked about was emotional intelligence. It was like, what? Just like once I found out that there was a term called imposter syndrome, and it wasn't just me inside my own head, I learned that there is this whole field about emotional intelligence and about how you show up to the world every day and about how you feed yourself. And that's been something that's really been my mission moving forward, and incorporating that even in my presentations and talks about grant mechanisms at NIH. I try to talk about the self and the person.
So like for me, I'm so excited to like hear about all of this. And I also like in the discussion board, we also have like the people side that like really love your energy, and you point out the health and wellness like of the family as a whole. That is a very like fantastic point that we need to think about. So Dr. Spann, like maybe you can also share some of your opinions.
Yeah, I'd love to. And for me, a term that I learned from one of my colleagues is it's busy, and it means, as an acronym, it's because you said yes. So busy because you said yes. And when I was younger, particularly in graduate school and in other opportunities, I said yes to a lot of things because I thought, I needed to get on that research. I needed to go teach for this class, or I needed to be a part of this opportunity. And I actually really weared myself thin trying to do a lot of things, as the old saying is, trying to be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I really just was trying to do a lot, and I had to realize that I was the one allowing myself to do that. I was the one pushing myself to do that. Nobody really forced me into these positions. I just thought this is what I had to do. And in doing so, my mental health, my physical health, and my emotional health became very thin. I think stress is very big in graduate school, and I think it's enormous in our lives. And I really had to get good at putting up boundaries and saying no to some things, but being okay with saying no and not feeling guilty or ashamed because I did that, and feeling like the next opportunity would not happen. And so when I started saying no to the certain things and yes to the things that I felt really committed to and passionate about, I felt like I was not working at all because it's my passion. And I had to realize that is okay. And I do that often now in my life. The other thing that I really started doing a lot better with is actually getting my rest. I was that student that would stay up to like 2, 3, 4 in the morning and just thinking like, hey, I'm getting all my work in, I'm studying hard, and I'll be prepared for that exam. And one of my good friends, she said, don't do that. I get my best rest before I do anything in life. And I took that and I realized, you know what, I really need to start thinking about my health and how I show up to these exams. How do I show up for a presentation? That anxiety, that stress, and feeling like I'm getting those last minute studies, that does not work. It never worked for me. And I tell my students, don't do the same. The reality is that you taking care of your wellness is how you're going to be prepared for that exam. It's how you show up for life. And I've just done really well with that. And it's a lesson, well, a hard lesson learned, I think, as Dr. Boone has also said, but I've learned it and I wouldn't change that or give that away for anything, because your health is really your wealth at this point in life. If you're not taking care of your health, you really are not investing in yourself and getting the best return of that interest.
Yeah, I also agree with that. Yeah, so like I also especially feel that like as a PhD right now, I also feel like, yeah, this is a good thing for me to think about like right now. And Dr. Roy, so maybe you can share some of your opinions or the suggestions or your own experiences.
Sure, I think everything that Dr. Boone and Dr. Spann have said is true to many of us. We have experienced all of these things to different extents and in different forms. You know, we all feel imposter syndrome, and it's really important to know that there's a community that exists. We all share the same feelings, and the important is finding those strategies that allow you to overcome the evil little you inside of your brain that is constantly, you know, machining plots against you. And I also had a very tough graduate education where I was working, I don't know, I don't remember, probably 15 hours a day or more. And eventually my health took a toll on that, and I had to undergo surgery, and I had many complications because of the amount of stress I had. So, you know, here I stand as a slightly transformed man. I joined the ranks of Dr. Boone in that as a PI now, I put a lot of emphasis on well-being and having a balanced work life and family life. And so I just wanted to, I'm sure we're going to talk about specifics, but three key points that I wanted to highlight from what Dr. Spann, Dr. Boone said that I think are key. You have to sleep well. Sleeping well means different to different people. For me, sleeping well means at least 7 hours. So I do my best to get my 7 hours of sleep as best as I can. I have a newborn baby girl at home, and so she doesn't really help me with that process. But even then, I coordinate with my wife to try to get as much sleep as I can. That's one key thing. Second key thing is you have to exercise, right? You have to exercise is key to relaxing your body, and also helps to relax your mind, your brain. And the third thing I wanted to say is you have to keep in mind that you're most productive and you're most successful is when you're rested and when you are creative. And if you're exhausted, you simply cannot be creative. And so you know, take these inputs into consideration, and remember that in order for you to be productive and successful, you also have to be aware and well rested.
I guess we lost Dr. Boone, but we can like wait her to come back, but we can at the same time we can move on. So because I noticed that like Dr. Spann, you're like a nationally certified school psychologist, and you're like also do your PhD in the psychology like aspects. So maybe we can share like some like specific psychological aspects of you, and especially like when was your original opinion of that, and what was your like during your training of the psychology, like what was your thinking about the stress and also the wellness, and then later on right now, like when you become a psychologist and also like training the students, so what was your what is your current kind of situation and kind of opinions right now?
That's a good question. And, you know, as a psychology student, I watched this one video that one of my professors showed. It was actually looking at baboons. And, you know, if you ever seen baboons in like their tribes and as an animal, there's a dominant male and everybody else is pretty much under that rule of the baboon. And the whole purpose of and when they showed the baboons, they showed that the cortisol, that enzyme that's in the body that's released during the fight or flight, was very high in all the other baboons, which also caused life expectancy or life, the length of their life to be shortened. So I bring that up because as we think about with psychology and just kind of a snippet of it, that there's a lot of discussion about stress and then how it affects or impacts the body. So I just want to stress this, quote unquote, as being a little funny. As we talk about stress, you don't see it, but the impact of allowing that cortisol to be in your body that long from stress, from the brain feeling like it's in fight or flight, where technically as human beings, we're not generally in that mode of feeling like we have to be under distress or be in that space. So long story short, what happens is allowing that to be in your body that long, it affects your immune system, it affects your digestive system, it affects your ability to think clearly, as we were just saying. So ultimately, psychology in itself has been able to open up my awareness to stress and how it really impacts the body. And as I work with K through 12, those kiddos, right now we're doing a lot more mindfulness with them, yoga. We're doing a lot more creative activities that get them to not do it like the adults are doing, because the adults are not doing it all the way right. But I'm hoping as adults, as we have all these new transcendental meditations and exercises and ways that we're eating, that we really maybe get more to the childlike mind and really let a lot of things go and not be as stressed, and really live our lives where we're being creative, as we just mentioned, Dr. Arroyo, and really being happy and have fun and enjoy pleasure and live our passions. That's where we think about the wellness model. And when we think about wellness, that's really what it's all about. Loving what you do, enjoying life, having fun, being happy, and releasing a lot of these anxieties and stress that we have as being either Americans or being adults or being in the workforce. I think if we can get to that kind of state of being, I think we'll be a lot better. And that's a very relaxed mind. So that's kind of tying to psychology and somewhat of what's happening in our world today, and looking at the school psychology and the kiddos and what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very awesome for me to learn all of this as psychology aspects, because my background is not psychology, but I always want to care about this during my daily life, especially during my stressful PhD training. So Dr. Boones, I know you are administering and providing leadership for the NIH loan repayment program, as well as representing NIH on matters related to the operations, the policy development, the things that you mentioned. And you took your PhD in biobehavioral health. So are there any lessons from your transition into the non-academic job? And it would be great if you could touch on how do you manage your health and wellness in academic research, as well as but you mentioned that you didn't pay much attention to that during your graduate study, but maybe you can to show us maybe discuss some of this transition, maybe kind of aspects that you pay attention to during this transition. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Is there an echo?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a echo.
How about we skip me for right now and we come back while I fix this?
Okay, yeah, sure. So we can move on to Dr. Roy. As you are having more interactions with graduate students and postdoc in academia, because you are faculty in their academia, and please maybe you can share us some of your opinions about managing health and wellness in academic research and field, and also suggestion. So maybe very specifically for the students or the postdoc at different stages.
Absolutely. I think the way you manage health and stress it's almost the same at all stages, or at least it should be the same at all stages. Of course, different stages of your professional career will come with different challenges. Before I give you a specific answer, I just wanna. There's a comment from Nivea in the chat, and I just want to say congratulations on passing your prelims. That's awesome. And I'm sorry that you're going through a difficult time. I think some of the examples that I'm about to describe are going to be somewhat useful to you. In my opinion, the best way to have, it's all about balance. It's all about time management. And the sooner you learn that and you gain those skills in your training, the more balanced your work-family life will be. What do I mean by time management? I think, every day you should map a time for you in which you can devote, try not to make it too short, but I would say 30 minutes to an hour of personal time where you do something that is emotionally and physically nutritious to you. So go for a walk, exercise, stop, take a break. Well, the way I approach this model with my students is I make them split their days into 30-minute chunks of time, and I make them have 10-minute breaks in between. And so what I tell them is, I want you to pick the time in your day when you're the most creative, the most aware, and I want you to devote that time to just doing writing. I want you to sit down and write. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be an essay. Just write for about 30 minutes, whatever you get, and then stop. After 30 minutes, stop, go for a walk, okay? And then come back and do the next 30-minute chunk of time. And you also have to incorporate into that routine, of course, your exercise, eating well, and sleeping well. Don't sleep in 30-minute chunks of time. Try to sleep for at least, 6 hours or more. Another thing that I personally do that I actually love that was mentioned earlier, I believe by Dr. Spann, is I am a big fan of mindfulness meditation. And so in those 10-minute breaks, if I don't go for a walk to kind of refresh my mind, then I sit down and meditate. And the goal of this is to allow your brain to rest. When we have been told our entire lives that we have to physically exercise to be healthy and feel better. But how about exercising our brains? How about resting our brains? It's a machine that is constantly turned on and working nonstop. And so by taking these 10-minute breaks throughout your day, and by organizing your schedule so that you can, write a little bit, do experiments, spend time with your kids if you have to do with kids like I do, and my colleagues also have to. Just make sure that you organize the schedule in such a way that you have specific chunks of time that you can devote to single activities, right? Try to avoid the multitasking. Try to focus your entire attention into that specific chunk of time, and then you have a break, and then you can move on to something else. This works really well, and maybe Dr. Boone, Dr. Spann can comment on this too, but it works specifically well if you're writing 7 proposals at the same time. Of course, you can't do that, right? So I work for about 40 minutes on one, then take a break, and I completely forgot about that one, and then try to move on to the next one. And in that way, I am refreshing my mind every time and focusing in a single activity at any point in time. Those are the suggestions that I thought will be useful.
Yeah, Dr. Boone and Dr. Spann, if you have kind of like also suggestions or like suggestions to our like Nivea in their discussion board, you can also pull up. Yeah, it's
I would say, Dr. Boone, I sound like you're
yeah, maybe you have like more kind of opinions about this kind of stress from the family.
I'm having still some issues. It seems like you all are breaking up. Am I breaking up or am I fine?
Dr. Boone, you're good.
I'm fine. Okay. So I'm hearing like every other word that you guys are saying. I'm so sorry that I'm having some issues. I didn't hear the last question, but the question that you asked me before was about transitions and how I prepared for transitions. And that's actually a pretty good question, because I think that most people don't really think about how to make transitions, especially while they're in the transitions. they'll tell you, I'm just doing what I know how to do in order to keep moving forward, right? So we feel like we are hamsters on a wheel, as opposed to just kind of like thinking about what we need to do. So, okay, this is a transition where I have to learn new information. Most of our transitions involve some sort of learning curve, right? Because otherwise, why are we kind of doing those? That transition, because there's that fear of the unknown. There'll probably be new people involved in it. There's new information involved that you have to learn. And most of the time, right, traits for people who invade their mind from time to time. One of the transition is to ask lots of questions, to lean on your individual minute. You have to support yourself. And I think that was something that I didn't really quite think about or vocalize, because a lot of times we think that if we reach out for help, it means that we're not prepared. And that's not necessarily what that should necessarily mean for us. What it should signal is that, okay, I might be feeling a little bit of stress right now. I might be feeling like, okay, I'm going into something really new and it's really scary for me. Who are the people in my life that can help me through this transition? What are the things that I probably need to know or to work on during this transition? And then ask lots of questions. I think it's a sign of intelligence when you're able to ask good questions about things so that you know what you're getting into. That was one of the first things about my first position at NIH, where I was like, I'm just going to put my nose to the grindstone and I'm going to work, right? I'm going to be a perfectionist and I'm going to get everything right, because that's kind of our personality traits as researchers, right? But the problem was that I went into an area that was unfamiliar to me, policy. I didn't know anything about policy. As a matter of fact, me with my big mouth in the interview, I said, I don't really know a lot about policy work, right? Duh, don't ever do that in an interview. That's a mistake, right? So they were like, that's fine. But you have all of the other background and experience that we need. It's easier for us to kind of get you up to speed on some of the things that you're already doing in an area of policy, but you're just not calling it that, than to teach you about the science of addiction, right? So once I kind of got that in my head, that they knew that there were areas that I needed to develop in, and they were committed to helping me develop in that, it got easier for me to ask the good questions that I needed to ask in order to learn, in order to grow. Because a lot of times we're not really thinking about these as learning and growth opportunities. We're thinking about them as, I've got to be perfect, right? So kind of think about Shaq and free throw. Shaq can't make free throws save his life, but he was still, famous basketball player, made millions and millions of dollars every year. He did not get to the free throw line and say, oh my God, I think I'm going to miss this. Or what do I need to do in order to make this shot? Blah, 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 blah. He just took the shot. He practiced for it. He prepared for it. He got his teammates around him. He practiced and practiced and practiced. And he didn't come up to that, free throw line thinking or trying to talk himself out of being successful or out of being great. He supported himself through that. These are the things that I need to do in order to get better, and I'm going to improve on those, or I'm going to keep trying every single time. And I think that we kind of forget about things, our networks, supporting ourselves, asking good questions so that we can be prepared, or so that we can know what we're kind of up against, because it's that fear of the unknown that often kind of like keeps us back.
Yeah.
And then scheduling.
Thank you, Dr. Boone. I guess your video is a bit like breakup. Maybe you can but the audio works okay for me. Maybe you can turn off your video. Yeah. So we have so many comments and questions in the discussion board right now, and I want just to quickly ask one questions can you all speak about your view on balancing personal wellness and social community engagement so we aren't burn out from the isolated individual hustle? So maybe Dr. Spann, do you have some ideas?
Yeah, I'd like to say, we've talked a lot about balance, but I want to say balance is you have it and then you can lose it, and it means that you can get it again. I think some people think I have balance and I'm always in balance. The reality is that's not the case. You could be in balance for 1 minute and the next minute you're out of balance. But the reality is to remember, hey, I feel out of balance, or this is not in balance. What do I need to do to recorrect that? And I think as we have scientists in here, when we think about homeostasis, it's really the concept of saying, like, what is that for me that keeps me in balance? And our body knows when it needs to be in balance, even if the conscious mind doesn't think about it. But we need to think more about what's the balance in our lives and how does that show up. Maybe a small echo. But I think the best way of doing that is when you think about your life, there are certain things that we need to do to make sure that we have balance. You know, that's work, that's purpose, but it also is what is enjoyable, what is fun in life, and also what are the things that are meaningful to me. What I would say is if you're trying to question that and what does that look like, create a pie chart. And it's 100% for the pie chart. And then divvy it up. See where you're putting a lot of your time. Is it where you're putting 90% of your life into work? Well, if 90% of your life work is passion, it's fun, it's getting to the bone of what it is to help society and to feel like you're fruitful, then 90% is perfect. But if it's 90% of your life and you feel like I'm not doing anything that I really want to do and enjoying life, think about what are pie chart more balance for you. You know, maybe it's family, maybe it's getting outside with nature more. But whatever it creates wellness for you and creating a sense of balance is what's right for you. And so for me, when it comes to my life, I know altruism is really fun and healthy for me. But I also know altruism, which is that sense of giving to community, giving to those around me, can be very draining. So I have to reclude myself at times and I have to take care of me. And I don't feel any kind of guilt or shame because as they say in the airplanes, as we are still flying, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and you have to take those breaths in before you can help the person next to you, even if that's a little kiddo. The reality is that you have to recharge. And so with me, I realized that my pie chart has to be filled with things that I enjoy, that I'm passionate about, that I have fun with, and it has work in there. And when the work is altruism, I realize that I have to give to altruism when I can, but I have to give to myself as well. And that's my balance. And when I find myself out of balance, I acknowledge it, I recognize it and say, let me get back in balance. And there's things that I personally do that work for me that help me to get there.
Yeah, Dr. Roy, do you have kind of specific opinions about the balance?
Oh, I like everything that Rufus just said. I think it's absolutely true that we're not balanced constantly, right? We're constantly imbalanced, and we have to constantly bring ourselves back into that balance. You know, in meditation, this is what we train to do. We train to pay attention to, well, actually, to be aware of what's happening in our minds and try to not get caught up by it, but instead just bring the attention back to the body and try to disconnect your mind from whatever it wants to do.
Yeah, Dr. Roy, maybe.
I think.
Yeah, maybe I have like even more specific question for you as your faculty here. Like I have a question in the discussion board.
Sure.
It seems that this person is just new coming to the grad study and feel lots of pressure, and especially do for himself, and also like feel like stressful when look around at peers, advisors, and academia, and also like looking for the suggestions for what are the things we can do as grad students, sort of at the bottom of their like organization, like to change the high stress and overworking environment, and how can we better talk to our advisors and department heads and administrations, like to the higher level to their department. And do you have some kind of suggestions for this person?
Yeah, these are great questions, and great questions. And I believe this is Caleb who asked the question. Caleb, grad school is tough. It's a difficult time, and so it's completely normal for you to feel this way. To give specific answers, this is my opinion, and you know, Erica and Rufus can give their opinions too. we live in a society with a purely capitalistic model in which success is measured by how much you have accomplished or how much you have done. I am of a different view. It took me a long time to fight this capitalistic view in myself. But my view is that success is measured by how happy you are. How happy you are and how much of that happiness you bring to the people around you. How much of that kindness you're projecting into the people that are around you. And so if you allow yourself to just take a quick break, just today, take a quick break, take a deep breath, and then say, well, you know, I entered grad school because I want to continue my career doing something that I love, and I want to be happy. So your goal is to be happy. And so now we have to evaluate a little bit, you know, what is the source of the stress that you're feeling at this time, and then start to work on that source of the stress. If there's a barrier talking to your advisor, the best solution is to talk more to that advisor, to keep an open line of communication and try to engage your advisor as much as you can. I love when my students come to me and tell me, Nets, I don't like this or I don't like that, because my goal is to train them to be their best. And if I am not doing that, then I want to learn from them, how I can correct my course so that I can give the most customized training for them. If your advisor is not responsive, which could happen in some circumstances, this is why it's so important to have a very strong network of mentors, other faculty or other people within academia or outside of academia that can help you navigate these stresses and give you some intellectual and emotional support. And the question that I most commonly get after this is, well, how do I find these mentors? And the answer to that is it takes initiative from you. But these mentors can be people that you know through your time in academia. This could be teachers that you took classes with. This could be colleagues that are more advanced in their careers that you feel trust in and that you think you can get good professional opinions from. And also when you go to conferences, when you go to scientific meetings or whatever your endeavors are, when you go to gatherings where you can do networking, you should always take those as an opportunity to try to connect to people that you respect, that you admire, and you know, feed that relationship so that you can eventually convert them into your mentors. You don't have to be aggressive about this. You just, you know, all it takes is to send an email and start a conversation. Hopefully that was a decent answer.
Thank you for sharing your opinions for this question. And because we can like move on to a very recent kind of situation related to that, the COVID pandemic has turned many of our lives upside down, and we have a question specific for that. There has been some reference to hamster wheel, and especially the last few months, since this is especially so. So this person called Conrad have some long known issues with like perfectionism, and maybe the person feels so hard during this pandemic time right now, and just want to ask if you have some like strategies for curbing this. Yeah, I have a bit of echoes.
Could you repeat that question for me one more time, please?
So the question is like, if you have some strategies for curbing the like perfectionism, especially also facing the pandemic situation right now, and also like in the research or in the daily life, maybe like perfectionism.
So let me see if I got that right, because I'm still having some issues. So any kind of like pointers on how to perfectionist in all of us? Is that your question?
Yep.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm still having some issues. I'm so sorry.
Dr. Boone, okay, maybe Dr. Spann, you can.
Yeah. You know, what I've learned during this time is that we need to give ourselves a lot more forgiveness and grace during this period. You know, your brain, I'm sorry, as I said, Brian, your brain is trying to process a lot of what's going on right now. It's dealing with the pandemic, you know, and it's almost very surreal, as well as there is dealing with just how to keep a day-to-day routine going. So many of us that may have either a personality where it's like you're in grad school, our personalities of OCD, like just very obsessive compulsive disorder, it goes up. You know, it's something, a trait of just being very organized, being very tedious, being very perfectionist because we want to have our assignments done. But during this time, there's a lot of research that's coming out now just saying like giving the grace and not feeling guilted and realizing that there's going to be mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, and there's going to be a lot of times where we have best laid plans to get stuff done for that day, and a lot of things may not happen. It's just because the brain is still trying to process through all this socially, emotionally, and mentally. So for the perfectionists or those that like to be very productive, you might find that you're not going to be as productive during this time. But if you have certain goals that you want to meet for the day, even if that's just, hey, I wanted to at least start the project, you may not finish the project, but find where you have some wins. And count those wins for yourself and saying, you know what, I may not have given 100% today, but I was at least able to maybe get 50 to 75%. And realizing that because our routines are shaken up, things aren't the same, we really have to remember that the brain is still processing this differently. And socially, we've been in a particular routine. So for the perfectionists, the grace that you may need to give yourself and realizing that the control, which, you know, we really don't have the control of everything, we may not have those things anymore.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Spann. And I think maybe we can move on to our last question from Natalie. So any advice for what to do when you feel like you've lost sight of what got you here in the first place? Like when the grain and work take up your energy and you feel like you care, empathy, etc., may have diminished or disappeared. Do you get yourself back after you graduate? So any kind of advice, maybe Dr. Roy, do you have this kind of some advice for Natalie?
I didn't hear you very well, Yuting. I'm sorry, can you just rephrase the question?
So like when the grain and the work take up your energy and you feel like your care, empathy, etc. have diminished or disappeared, do you have any advice for this? Like, do you get yourself back after you graduate, and or kind of advice like when you have this kind of situation, lost sight what you got here in the first place?
Yeah, so okay, so this is related to Natalie's comment, I believe. So what happens when you feel like you've lost sight of the goals that you want to accomplish, and then you start grinding, you know, we call it ruminating about this. You know, rumination is unfortunately something that we all do, and it's one of the most toxic things that you could be doing because it's energy draining, and it really doesn't help you to refocus and be productive. I think, you know, one big lesson that I had to learn in my career was the meaning of being compassionate and how to be compassionate with yourself. That is, you know, there was a question about perfectionism. You know, it's virtually impossible to be perfect, right? And you may have very high aspirations that are in some cases even maybe not possible, right? And so, you know, by being compassionate to yourself, what I mean is just do periodic checkups on you. Sit down. We all have to do, and many of us do it, in fact. So, you know, once a month, once a couple of months, sit down and talk to yourself and say, how am I feeling? How much progress am I making? Am I, you know, reaching my goals, or am I feeling like something's slowing me down? How am I doing with my exercise routine? How am I doing with my breaks? what are the milestones that I have set for myself, and are those milestones too high, too far apart? Can I be a little bit less ambitious and maybe split them in two? And by allowing yourself to, we got the echo back again. But by allowing yourself to you know, decrease the expectation a little bit, and taking a break, making a pause, and replanning, you will start to feel like you're regaining control of that, you know, light at the end of the tunnel that you're trying to pursue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have been saying some very similar, making some very similar points, right? So with all of this, it's enlisting your networks, enlisting the assistance of other mentors, because when I was in graduate school, I thought we had one mentor who was supposed to serve everything for us, right? As opposed to having different mentors for the different aspects of our research, but also having people that we can talk to, talk about stuff, talk about grad school, talk about what it's like to be in grad school, and the different issues that were brought up. Like, for example, how do I manage up to my mentor so that I can tell him I have way too many responsibilities right now? And I didn't think about self-advocacy really until I was in my own first job. And I think that that's your first responsibility to yourself, is to be your own advocate. So I think with, you know, managing up, even when you're in your profession, it's not that, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. It's just really kind of taking a realistic look at your activities. The first time I even thought about that, in my lab, in my first postdoc said, you're running around like a chicken with its head cut off. There's no way that you can do all of these things that he's asked you to do. You need to write down the priorities for each one of these. And in your next meeting, go and talk to him and say, okay, well, these are all of the things that we have to get done. This is how much time it takes me to do all of these. These seem to be budding priorities. Which one do you subscribe that I should do first? Or first, second, and third. So setting what those priorities are. And I believe that Dr. Spann talked about that too, setting your priorities, what things are important to you. So I'm stressed out because you have 10,000 things to do. Reassess what you're doing, reassess those priorities. There are going to be times where you're just busy, flat out. That's just life, right? And then wait till you add a spouse and children and community service and all of those things to it. It can lend itself to us feeling pretty stressed or pretty stretched, right? Sometimes we have to figure out what things we can pull off of our plates, at least on a temporary basis, because you have to focus down sometimes on certain things. So I think that balance is a myth. So we should stop talking about balance, because we're never going to be in complete balance for anything. And I think when people find that they're not in complete balance, where they're skipping through fields of lilies, you know, and everything is fine, they feel like they're failing. It's going to be common for you to be voting or have to devote your more attention to certain things than others at different points in your week, in your day, and it's okay. But one of the things that Dr. Arroyo and Dr. Spann both said is giving yourself some grace and being compassionate to yourself. Because if we talk to other people like we talk to ourselves, they would not talk to us. They would not be our friends, because we're not being self-supportive. So if your first job is to be an advocate, then your 1A job is to be self-supportive, because there's no way that you can get through all of the things that you need to get through without being your own best friend. And also, I think that we're talking about with being busy, you just kind of can't swallow the whole elephant with one bite. Understand that certain things will take time. Keep moving towards your goal. That's the success. Because I think that a lot of times we see that big goal as the end all be all, and we don't really recognize and give honor to those small successes every single day.
Thank you very much for sharing this, Dr. Boone. And I guess it's about time we wrap up now. I want to conclude our session by again, thank you, Dr. Spann. Thank you, Dr. Boone. Thank you, Dr. Arroyo, for meeting with us today and providing such important insight and tips related to our everything, not just our topic, wellness and health, but also your own personal experiences. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You guys
Bye.
take care of your health and wellness.
Thank
See
you. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye.